Dumela Batswana, se ke sebaga sa Botswana, sebaga sa Batswana, sebaga sa Manyapetsa, and this is Issues on Red, a program where we get to talk about very informative topics in a very fun environment and youth-filled, of course. Today, like usual, I'm not alone. I'm with very special guests who I'll give time to introduce themselves, and we'll be talking about consent and setting boundaries. I don't know about you, but I'm very excited. Now, hi guys.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you guys doing?
Doing great, thanks.
Good,
Yourself?
good.
I'm good. Please introduce yourself.
Okay. I'm Anna Samuel from Sparkling Leaders Initiative.
Hi, Anna. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm Keith Shangare. I'm an attorney with Mhlanga Legal.
All right. Welcome to the show, and I'm very happy to have you here.
Thank you.
So we're talking about consent and setting boundaries. First, I want us to lay a foundation. What do these words mean to you guys? Starting with you, Anne.
Okay. For me, my understanding of consent is a permission and approval you get from someone to do something. So that's my understanding.
That is very true and
Yeah.
precise. What about you, Keith?
You know, I'll second what Anna just said, that consent really is the act of agreeing or allowing someone to do something in any setting that you're in.
All right. And I think growing up in this kind of environment, in the kind of environment that we are in, people don't understand the importance of consent, of asking for permission before doing something as simple as a hug or a handshake or a kiss on the cheek. What do we have to say about that? Why is consent important in every relationship, not only just a romantic relationship or a friendship?
Okay. So like I said, consent is like getting a permission. So obviously, if we're and then you do hella without someone's permission,
Yeah.
how cause the conflict between thing,
Yes.
right? So but then if all it's our consent the moment faced, and then that means for a while avoid that when it comes the conflict and all that. So and then consent to build trust. Let's say for example you want to go through someone's phone, so you have to ask for approval first for you so avoid that when it comes the conflict and all that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Why is consent important, Keith?
Consent is important because, one, consent is a very gray area, right? People assume that because you've been given consent, it means you have a right to act in a certain way. But it's important to understand that consent can also be withdrawn. And there are a number of various factors that come into play. So consent can be withdrawn for the number one reason is that someone loses interest. That's one. Where you've given consent to a hug, you've given consent to either sexual intercourse. And it's important to have that conversation with people because that can mean the difference between one being found criminally liable for certain acts. That's one. And it means that people need to understand that if one is given consent in the beginning, the withdrawal of that consent means whatever act that is stops. It means don't touch my phone, don't touch me. It also goes into the issue that you raised before, boundaries, because boundaries go into the physical space of that and go into the mental and emotional space. So once you breach consent, which means you're now breaching those physical boundaries and now breaching those emotional and mental boundaries. So consent is very important, one, to establish respectful relationships. It's important to establish those physical and emotional boundaries. And it's also important to establish the mental aspect of it all, because once consent is violated, which means the trust goes, as Anna is saying, once the trust is gone, then mentally someone is no longer in a space, they don't know whether the consent is forced or the consent is actually something that they've agreed to in the beginning.
I really love that you really highlighted that consent can be withdrawn, because I think it also speaks to individuals to say just because you gave someone consent doesn't mean then you are fully entitled to just stick on that. If you feel uncomfortable, you can always go back to say, no, now I'm setting a boundary. Now, when it comes to setting boundaries, how then do we set boundaries? what is the best way? How can you best set a boundary to be like, I don't like this, I don't like that? Because personally, I have a problem with setting boundaries. I'm not someone who can just speak for themselves and go like, I don't like this. So how then can I practice just this tradition of setting boundaries for myself, Keith?
I mean, the number one factor that we all engage in every day is communication. So be very firm in your communication and be very respectful of yourself. Once you're firm in your communication, someone understands that Keith will not allow these boundaries to be breached. My communication is that I want to accept someone to overstep this mark, and my communication is that my view of my boundaries is that you cannot speak to me a certain way, because remember, once you breach those boundaries and you don't have the borders around you, it means you allow someone to break into that space. So that's why I say before, boundaries are not only physical, but they're also mental and emotional. Physical boundaries, I can push you, you can push me. That's easy to breach, right? And that's where the respect element comes in. But once you allow someone to get into your mental and emotional boundaries, that's where we have a problem. So that's why I'm saying communication is the number one factor. Just be clear and concise in your communication with individuals.
That is very true. What do you have to say about that, Ane?
Okay, I do agree with him. So communication is very vital. And but then again, like you have to know yourself. Self-awareness is very vital. For you to effectively communicate, you have to know who you are. What do you want and why do you want that? For example, like, are you that person you don't mind someone to use vulgar language? Are you that someone you allow you don't mind a person like are you that someone you allow someone the way like shouting at you and all that? Are you that kind of a person? Like, you need to know yourself first. Who am I? You get?
All right, hold.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Anna. Hold that thought. We have a lot to say when it comes to consent and boundaries, but let's just go for a quick break, and then we'll be right back to learn more and talk about our personal experiences. Welcome back. If you just tuned in, this is Issues on Red with myself, Sabaha Manyapeza, and I'm not alone like usual. I'm with two very beautiful and handsome, I must say, guests in studio. I have Keith and Ane, and we are talking about consent and setting boundaries. Now, for the second part of the show, this is very interesting. I cannot wait to hear the stories. We're going to talk about our personal stories where we felt like our boundaries were breached, or where we couldn't stand up for ourselves and say, I don't like this, don't do this to me. And I'll start. I'm someone who is very introverted, and I struggle with setting boundaries for myself, or rather giving someone consent or permission to do or not do something. A very popular one is when I'm in a mall. I don't know if you guys have been to Real Park. There are men, there are individuals who literally just hold your hand, pull you, try to hold you. Would you like to take a picture? Would you like to do this? Usually I never know what to do with that situation. I'm never like, no, don't do that, don't touch me. I just try to pull my hand off and go on about my day. But I think after this episode, I'll be like, no, don't do that. I am not comfortable with you touching me. Please don't touch me, right? So I'd like to hear your personal stories with consent and setting boundaries. Starting with you, Ane.
Okay. Not that I remember, but hey, okay, like I said, self-awareness. So I know me. So if I don't want something, I don't want something. So I'm not sure if I once experienced a situation where motun dressing without my consent. You get? So, but then, like you're saying, the situation and you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, then I do experience that. I think it was last week. I was working, and then this guy, and like I didn't know how to, because I was just passing. You can't say, hey, don't touch me, because you don't know how to react and learn and all that. So then I would love to know. So what do you do? So usually I just, okay, I don't respond. I just give him just my serious face here, like just to show him, I don't like what you did. So yeah, I guess
All right.
that's how I handle the situation.
All right, thank you, Anna. Anna says usually she doesn't like to say anything because she does not know how the other person will respond. I cannot wait to hear Keith's story.
Oh, well, I think there's this societal norm that men accept boundaries to be breached, right? I think my experience is when normally, all of us here will take pictures, right?
Yeah.
And normally when you're taking pictures, you really can't see what's going on behind because either hands are on your shoulders or on your waist. And it tends to happen that sometimes most people I've had that experience when someone is taking a picture and someone will touch you maybe on your behind, and obviously the camera can see what's going on. So those are the issues that come up with for men. It's an expectation that we don't have boundaries, we'll accept any form of engagement or contact. So that's my experience with that whole breaching of boundaries.
Yeah. Well, I like to talk about more subtle instances. I love that you talked about taking pictures because I'm a creator myself. And I think the form of consent that I've struggled with for a lot of time is when an instance where we take a group picture and I fail on my side to ask every individual can I post this? Is it okay? Do you look fine? And I think it's a learning curve for me to say, I have to ask everyone in the picture if they're okay with me posting it. And I don't know if you want to talk about more subtle instances where consent or setting boundaries can be put in place?
A very simple, maybe subtle engagement is maybe on your phone, for example. We all have mobile phones, right? And friends will take your phone and take pictures.
Yeah.
And sometimes they know your password. That's one of the given factors. They'll start going through your phone, right? That's not consent.
I don't like that.
I've simply asked you to take pictures using my phone.
Yeah.
But you're going through my pictures, you're going through my messages, and this could be even people in a relationship. Just because you're in a relationship with someone, it doesn't mean you have the consent to go through their messages, their pictures. There's this assumption that we're in a relationship, so we can just go through each other's phones. So that's another area of consent that I think affects everyone daily. So your phone might be with your friend, your partner, and they just start going through your phone, your messages, your pictures. That's consent that's, I think, violated and abused every single day. So I think that's a more subtle version of violation of consent.
All right, I'm going to throw this scenario to Keith and Anne, an instance of a date, right? A guy and a girl go out on a date. I want us to discuss setting boundaries and consent in a date situation. First, who has to pay? Because I know traditionally a man has to pay, or at least that's what I think personally too. But do we think this is always a given that a guy has to pay, or is there something that we have to talk about, consent and all that in a date? Keith?
Wow. I think times have changed. That's my view, that if it's a date, is it a first date? And are we meeting just to get to know each other? And if that's the case, then I'll always say to set those boundaries, it's important that you discuss first communication, right?
Yeah.
Where are we going for the date? And are you picking me up, or are we meeting there? And when you get to the date, am I expected to pay for myself? Are you expected to pay for yourself? And if I'm to pay, that's the end of the conversation. If you are to pay, that's the end of the conversation. Because I think people don't have that conversation or that communication. And when they get there, some men are different, right? It's individualistic. They expect that I've taken you for a date, we've gone to XYZ, and I've paid. I've spent my 2,000 pula or 500 pula, So from here, what happens? Are we going home together? And is that some form of exchange? I've taken you for dinner. So communication is important. Set those boundaries.
I cannot help but wonder how many dates never happen because the man said we have to split the bill or you have to pay. But that's just my thought. What do you have to say about that, Anne?
Okay. He said everything because it's all about clear communication, honestly speaking. Like you have to communicate. If right now you ask me, okay, let's go on a date. So I have to ask you, are you taking me out bills on you or what? You know, we have to communicate. So after that, what are we gonna do? Like, okay, do you expect me to go with you at your place or what? Like, let's communicate. So yeah.
There are a lot of boundaries and there are a lot of blurred lines rather when it comes to consent and boundaries, also because there's always traditions behind every theory, or that an instance is when you ask someone to go on a date with you, then it definitely means you have to pay. We don't have to talk about it. We don't have to discuss it. If you ask me out, you are paying because you are asking me out. But like they said, I think clear communication and respect goes a long way, and it's something that we need to practice. It's a long journey, but it's definitely possible, and we live each day to learn.
Do you think it's possible for a person to give consent under the influence of drug and alcohol abuse?
Nah, not really.
And why is that?
Why is that? Because you're not really like in the mental state to make a decision. You're like intoxicated, so you cannot really figure out what's happening.
So there's a high likely chance that a person can be violated when they are under the influence of drug and alcohol abuse.
Not really high, but yes.
Okay. Do you think it is possible for somebody to give consent while under the influence of alcohol and drug abuse?
To a certain level, I don't want to say the influence of drugs and alcohol doesn't play a role, because to a certain level there are people who just calmly control their alcohol drinking, and others are being controlled by their drugs. So it plays a role, because you feel like you're above the world. You feel like now you can control or lay a hand on someone. Yeah.
Welcome back to the episode where we get to share the stories of what other people are experiencing online or wherever they may be. Our story for the day goes like this. Have you ever felt pressured into doing something you weren't comfortable with? Sounds familiar? My name is Wame, and this is my story. I met Bofelo during my first year of college. He was charming, funny, and seemed to genuinely care about me. Our relationship moved quickly, and before long, we were spending almost all of our time together. Friends envied our closeness, but there were aspects of our relationship that they didn't see. That sounds very close to home. We all have that one couple we really want, to see or to be around with or to experience that thing that they're experiencing. But the story continues. Bofelo had a habit of pushing boundaries. At first, it was small things, teasing me about my clothes or the way that I did my hair. But soon, it escalated to more serious matters. He started pressuring me into physical intimacy I wasn't ready for. Each time I hesitated or said no, he would make me feel guilty, saying things like, if you loved me, you'd do this, or everyone else is doing this. Emotional blackmail. I began to doubt myself, wondering if I was being unreasonable. Despite my discomfort, I often gave in, afraid of losing him or being seen as difficult. But the more I conceded, the more I lost touch with my own needs and desires. One night, things came to a head. We were at a party, and Bofelo kept trying to get me to leave with him. I wasn't feeling well. I wanted to stay with my friends. He got angry, saying that I was embarrassing him and ruining the night. That's when I realized I needed to draw a line. I told him no, firmly and clearly, and stayed at the party with my friends. His reaction was explosive, but I stood my ground. Have you ever dealt with a narcissistic person? Sounds to me like this is exactly what Wame was dealing with. The following days were tough. Bufelo called repeatedly, trying to apologize and make me feel guilty for standing up to him. But I knew deep down that I had made the right choice. I started talking to a counselor at school who helped me understand that consent isn't just about saying yes or no to sex. It's about feeling comfortable and respected in all aspects of a relationship. With time, I learned to set boundaries and communicate my needs clearly. I realized that a healthy relationship is built on mutual respect, not guilt or pressure. I also began educating myself and others about consent, sharing my story to help others recognize and assert their boundaries. Boundaries are important in every relationship, whether it's a friendship, whether it's family, or whether it's your boyfriend, a church, whatever the space that you're in. Eventually, I ended things with Bofelo. It was a painful decision, but necessary for my well-being. I surrounded myself with supportive friends and family who helped me rebuild my confidence and trust in myself. Kudos to you, Ame. Today, I'm in a relationship with a wonderful person named Tato, who respects my every way possible. Tato has shown me what a healthy, loving relationship looks like, one where I feel safe and valued. There's no reason to stay in a relationship where you feel like you're being undermined, undervalued, and you don't feel up to par or even confident in the person that you are. Because for a relationship to thrive, the both of you need to express yourself as confidently as you can and be really realistic. So if you find yourself in a situation same as Wame, take that step to find help, to someone to talk to who can guide you right back where you need to be. But most importantly, surround yourself with love and supportive friends. And that is how we end our read for the day. Thank you for tuning in.